The rise of Kuan Yew stands as one of the most consequential political developments of the 20th century. In little more than a decade, he moved from the position of a colonial subject operating within the legal profession to the central architect of an independent state. His ascent was shaped by the disintegration of European imperial authority in Asia, the pressures of Cold War politics, and the complex realities of governing a deeply divided, multi-ethnic society. This formative period, stretching from his birth in 1923 to Singapore's independence in 1965, was marked by political struggle, calculated alliances, and decisive leadership. It was during these years that Lee developed the pragmatic and often harsh approach to governance that would later define his rule. His guiding assumption was that survival, rather than ideological purity, must be the overriding priority of any state emerging from colonial rule. Kuan Yew was born on 16 September 1923 into a Straits Chinese family in Singapore, then a key outpost of the British Empire. His upbringing reflected the hybrid cultural environment of colonial society, where Western education and Asian traditions coexisted in uneasy balance. His family belonged to the English-educated middle class, a social group that benefited from colonial structures while remaining excluded from real political power. This background provided Lee with access to education and opportunity, but it also exposed him to the inequalities embedded within colonial rule. From an early age, he understood that advancement within the system did not equate to control over it. Singapore, under British rule, was a commercial hub of immense strategic value, yet its political structure remained tightly controlled by colonial administrators, and its society was divided along ethnic and economic lines. Chinese, Malay, and Indian communities often lived in parallel, rather than integrated social worlds, while wealth was unevenly distributed. This environment would later inform Lee's insistence on multiracialism and social cohesion. He recognized that without deliberate intervention, these divisions could become sources of instability and conflict. Lee's education at elite institutions such as Raffles Institution fostered intellectual discipline and competitive ambition. His fluency in English gave him access to the language of administration and power, while also distancing him from large segments of the population who were educated in Chinese or Malay. At this stage, Lee was not yet a revolutionary figure. He was, in many respects, a product of the colonial meritocratic system, one who excelled within its parameters while gradually becoming aware of its limitations. The Japanese invasion of Singapore in 1942 marked a decisive turning point. The rapid collapse of British forces shattered the illusion of imperial invincibility. For Lee, this was a moment of profound realization. The colonial power that had seemed permanent and unassailable was revealed to be fragile and vulnerable. This experience fundamentally altered his worldview. It convinced him that dependence on external powers was dangerous, and that political authority must ultimately rest in local hands. During the Japanese occupation, Lee lived under harsh and uncertain conditions. He took on various roles, including work as a translator, navigating a system defined by coercion and scarcity. The brutality of the occupation left a lasting impression on him, reinforcing his belief that order and stability were essential to prevent chaos and suffering. The occupation transformed Lee from a passive observer into a future participant in political life. It deepened his awareness of power and its consequences, and it instilled in him a determination that Singapore must never again be left defenseless or politically subordinate. After the war, Lee traveled to Britain to study law at the University of Cambridge. There he distinguished himself academically, graduating with high honours. His time in Britain exposed him to a society grappling with its own post-war transformation and the gradual dismantling of empire. While in Britain, Lee encountered a range of political ideas, including socialism, anti-colonial nationalism, and parliamentary democracy. These influences broadened his intellectual horizons, but he did not adopt any of them uncritically. Instead, he developed a pragmatic approach that prioritized effectiveness over ideological consistency. Lee came to view politics as a practical discipline, concerned with outcomes rather than abstract principles. He believed that policies should be judged by their ability to produce stability and progress. This flexibility would later enable him to adopt a wide range of policies, drawing from different ideological traditions as circumstances required. Upon returning to Singapore, Lee established himself as a lawyer. His legal work brought him into close contact with trade unions and anti-colonial activists, many of whom were engaged in struggles against both economic exploitation and political marginalization. By representing union leaders and activists, Lee gained credibility among working-class communities. This involvement provided him with valuable political connections and insight into the mechanisms of mass mobilization. It also brought him into contact with left-wing groups, including those with communist affiliations. Lee's relationship with these groups was strategic rather than ideological. He recognized their organizational strength and their ability to mobilize support, but he remained wary of their political objectives. This balancing act would become a defining feature of his early political career. In 1954, Lee co-founded the People's Action Party. The party was designed as a broad coalition that could unite different segments of Singaporean society in the struggle for self-government. It brought together English-educated professionals, Chinese-educated activists, and labor organizers. The diversity of the PAP was both a strength and a source of tension. While it enabled the party to build a wide base of support, it also created ideological divisions that would later lead to internal conflict. In its early years, however, the shared goal of ending colonial rule helped maintain unity. Lee quickly emerged as the dominant figure within the party. His ability to articulate a clear political vision, combined with his organizational skills and strategic thinking, positioned him as the leader of the movement. He was able to navigate the party's internal complexities while maintaining its outward cohesion. Throughout the 1950s, the PAP led the campaign for self-government. This effort combined electoral participation with public mobilization and negotiation with British authorities. The party's message resonated with a population increasingly dissatisfied with colonial rule. The political environment of the time was marked by unrest, including strikes and protests. Communist influence within labor and student movements added another layer of complexity. Lee had to balance cooperation with these groups against the need to present the PAP as a responsible governing force. In 1959, the PAP won a decisive electoral victory, and Kuan Yew became Prime Minister. This marked a critical transition from opposition politics to governance. Lee was now responsible for managing the very system he had sought to transform. Upon taking office, Lee moved quickly to establish effective governance. He prioritized economic development, administrative efficiency, and social stability. These early policies were aimed at addressing immediate challenges while laying the groundwork for long-term growth. Lee also took steps to consolidate political power by marginalizing opposition groups, particularly those associated with leftist movements. He viewed political instability as a direct threat to Singapore's survival and was willing to take firm measures to maintain control. A key aspect of Lee's strategy was the creation of strong state institutions. He emphasized professionalism in the civil service and took measures to combat corruption. These efforts were essential in establishing public confidence in the government. Lee believed that Singapore's long-term survival depended on integration with a larger political entity. The merger with Malaysia in 1963 was seen as a way to achieve economic and security stability. Despite initial optimism, the merger quickly encountered difficulties. Differences in economic policy, political competition, and ethnic relations created tensions between Singapore and the Malaysian federal government. Lee's vision of a Malaysian Malaysia, based on equality among ethnic groups, conflicted with policies that prioritized Malay dominance. This ideological clash intensified political governance and contributed to growing instability. By 1965, the relationship between Singapore and Malaysia had deteriorated beyond repair. Political disagreements and communal tensions made continued union impossible. On 9 August 1965, Singapore was expelled from Malaysia and became an independent nation. This was not the result of a long-term plan, but a sudden and unexpected development. Lee's public announcement of independence, in which he appeared visibly emotional, underscored the seriousness of the situation. Independence brought not only sovereignty, but also immense uncertainty. At the moment of independence, Singapore faced severe challenges. Its economy was fragile, its security uncertain, and its society divided. There were doubts, both internally and externally, about whether the new state could survive. Lee understood that these challenges required decisive and coordinated action. His focus was on creating a stable political environment, fostering economic development, and building a cohesive national identity. Although the full transformation of Singapore would occur in the years that followed, the foundations were laid during this period. Lee established key principles that would guide his administration, including meritocracy, multiracialism, and strong central authority. These principles were not merely theoretical. They were practical responses to the challenges facing the new nation. When Singapore became independent in August 1965, its prospects appeared deeply uncertain. It was a small island state with no natural resources, limited industrial capacity, and a population divided along ethnic and linguistic lines. Its separation from Malaysia had been sudden and involuntary, leaving its leadership with little time to prepare for the realities of sovereignty. In this context, the task facing Kuan Yew was not merely to govern, but to ensure the survival of the state itself. The decades that followed would see Singapore undergo a transformation that defied expectations. Under Lee's leadership, it evolved from a vulnerable post-colonial city into a highly developed, globally integrated economy. Yet this transformation was not achieved through liberal democratic expansion, but through a system characterized by strong central authority, limited political pluralism, and a governing philosophy rooted in pragmatism rather than ideology. This period therefore presents a complex and often contested legacy, one that combines undeniable success with enduring debate about the costs at which that success was achieved. In the immediate aftermath of independence, Singapore's economic situation was precarious. The loss of its hinterland following separation from Malaysia threatened trade flows, while unemployment remained high and industrialisation was still in its early stages. Lee and his government responded with a strategy that rejected both isolationism and dependency. Instead, they sought to integrate Singapore into the global economy as a competitive and reliable hub for trade, manufacturing and investment. Central to this strategy was the deliberate attraction of foreign capital. Multinational corporations were encouraged to establish operations in Singapore through a combination of political stability, favorable regulatory conditions, and a disciplined workforce. The government invested heavily in infrastructure, recognizing that efficient ports, transport systems, and utilities were essential to economic competitiveness. Over time, these investments transformed Singapore into a major center for shipping and logistics, reinforcing its historic role as a trading hub while expanding its industrial base. Lee's approach to economic policy reflected his broader pragmatism. Although he had been exposed to socialist ideas during his education, he did not hesitate to embrace market-oriented policies when they proved effective. At the same time, the state retained a significant role in guiding development. Government-linked companies and strategic planning allowed the leadership to direct resources toward priority sectors, ensuring that growth was both rapid and coordinated. As Singapore's economy developed, it moved beyond labor-intensive manufacturing into higher-value industries, including electronics, petrochemicals, and financial services. By the late 20th century, it had established itself as a global financial center, attracting investment and talent from around the world. This transformation led to a dramatic rise in living standards, with Singapore achieving levels of prosperity that placed it among the world's most developed nations. Economic growth alone was not sufficient to guarantee stability. Singapore's population was ethnically diverse, and the potential for communal tension remained a constant concern. Lee's government therefore placed great emphasis on building a cohesive national identity that could transcend ethnic and cultural differences. The principle of multiracialism became a central pillar of state policy, shaping decisions in areas such as housing, education, and public administration. One of the most significant tools for promoting social cohesion was public housing. Large-scale housing developments not only improved living conditions, but also facilitated the deliberate mixing of different ethnic groups. This approach was designed to prevent the formation of segregated communities and to foster everyday interaction among citizens of different backgrounds. In this way, social policy was closely linked to political stability. Education was another key area of nation building. The government invested heavily in creating a system that would produce a skilled and adaptable workforce. Bilingualism was encouraged, reflecting both practical economic considerations and the need to maintain cultural connections. The emphasis on meritocracy ensured that advancement was based on ability and performance, reinforcing the legitimacy of the state while also maximizing the use of human capital. Equally important was the government's commitment to maintaining a clean and efficient administration. Corruption, which had undermined governance in many post-colonial states, was treated as an existential threat. Strict laws and rigorous enforcement created a political culture in which public officials were expected to meet high standards of integrity. This contributed not only to domestic stability, but also to international confidence in Singapore as a place to do business. While Singapore's economic and social achievements were widely recognized, its political system remained tightly controlled. The People's Action Party, under Lee's leadership, maintained a dominant position throughout this period. Elections were held regularly, but the political landscape was structured in such a way that meaningful competition was limited. Lee believed that political stability was a prerequisite for economic development. He viewed adversarial politics and unrestrained dissent as potential sources of division and inefficiency. As a result, his government implemented measures that restricted the activities of opposition parties and limited the scope of public criticism. Legal instruments, including defamation laws, were used to challenge and often discredit political opponents. The media operated within a framework that emphasized responsibility and national interest over unrestricted expression. While this ensured a degree of consistency in public messaging, it also constrained the development of an independent press. Critics argued that these restrictions limited accountability and suppressed alternative viewpoints, while supporters contended that they helped maintain social harmony in a diverse society. The use of internal security laws further illustrated the government's emphasis on control. These laws allowed for the detention of individuals deemed to pose a threat to stability, often without the need for a conventional trial. Such measures were justified as necessary in the context of Cold War tensions and domestic unrest. but they remain one of the most controversial aspects of Lee's rule. As a small state in a strategically sensitive region, Singapore had to navigate a complex international environment. Lee's foreign policy was characterized by pragmatism and caution. He sought to maintain good relations with major powers while avoiding excessive dependence on any single country. This approach allowed Singapore to benefit from global economic integration without becoming entangled in geopolitical rivalries. Regionally, Singapore played an active role in promoting cooperation and stability. It was a founding member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which aimed to foster economic growth and political collaboration among Southeast Asian states. Through ASEAN, Singapore contributed to the development of a more stable regional order, which in turn supported its own security and prosperity. On the global stage, Lee himself became a highly respected figure. His insights into governance, economic development, and international relations were sought by leaders from around the world. Despite Singapore's small size, its success gave it a level of influence that extended far beyond its geographical boundaries. In 1990, Lee stepped down as Prime Minister, marking a significant moment in Singapore's political development. Unlike many leaders in post-colonial states, he managed the transition of power in a controlled and orderly manner, ensuring continuity rather than disruption. His successor inherited a stable and well-functioning system, reflecting the strength of the institutions that had been built over the preceding decades. Despite relinquishing the premiership, Lee remained an influential figure within the government, first as senior minister and later as minister mentor. In these roles, he continued to shape policy and provide strategic guidance. His presence ensured that the fundamental principles of governance he had established remained intact, even as new leaders emerged. Lee's influence extended beyond Singapore. He became an elder statesman whose views were widely respected in international circles. His speeches and writings offered insights into the challenges of governance in a rapidly changing world, and his experience was often cited as evidence of the effectiveness of strong, pragmatic leadership. The legacy of Lee Kuan Yew is both remarkable and contested. On one hand, he is widely regarded as the founding father of modern Singapore, the leader who transformed a vulnerable city-state into one of the most prosperous and stable nations in the world. His emphasis on discipline, efficiency, and long-term planning produced tangible results that continue to shape Singapore's success. On the other hand, his methods have been the subject of sustained criticism. The conditions placed on political freedoms, the dominance of a single party, and the limited scope for dissent have led some observers to question whether Singapore's success could have been achieved through more democratic means. This debate reflects a broader tension between different models of governance, particularly in the context of development. Supporters of Lee argue that his approach was necessary given the circumstances Singapore faced at independence. They contend that strong leadership and tight control were essential to prevent instability and to create the conditions for economic growth. Critics, however, maintain that such measures came at the cost of individual freedoms and political diversity. The period from 1965 to 2015 represents the culmination of Lee Kuan Yew's vision for Singapore. Through a combination of economic innovation, social engineering, and political control, he guided the country from uncertainty to extraordinary success. His leadership demonstrated that rapid development could be achieved through a model that prioritized stability and efficiency over liberal democratic expansion. Yet his legacy cannot be reduced to a simple narrative of success. It raises fundamental questions about the nature of governance and the relationship between power and progress. The achievements of Singapore under Lee are undeniable, but so too are the controversies surrounding his methods. In this sense, his life and career continue to serve as a point of reference in debates about how nations can best navigate the challenges of modernity. Ultimately, the impact of Lee Kuan Yew extends far beyond the borders of Singapore. His example remains central to discussions about development, leadership, and the difficult choices that shape the destiny of nations. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to Blistering History.